All right. And we're live. We're on tonight with Camille Knudson, and she is running for Utah Senate Seat 1. She has a little bit of history in politics, but we're going to have her go ahead and kind of tell us about herself and about what politics she does and kind of her history and lead into it. So introduce yourself, Camille.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I have to admit, though, I think I'm more nervous talking to you guys than I am hundreds of people.
Why is that?
I don't know.
It's Dozer.
Yeah, maybe it's, I don't know.
Look at those eyes.
The guard dog.
I've lived in Twilla County for almost 10 years, moved from Draper out here, married and have 3 kids. My oldest is graduating from Stansbury High School this year and actually will be off to boot camp for the Marine Corps.
Oh, yeah.
In September is when he'll ship out or go out, whatever. And then I have a 7th grader and a 2nd grader. And right now, I currently serve as vice chair on our school board of education. I'm finishing up my first term. So, of course, I was elected almost 4 years ago.
Okay. And now, before we started, you told us a little bit of your history on why you got into, frankly, into politics from the beginning. So go ahead and tell the listeners what drew you into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, let's see, it was about 6 years ago. Just I stay-at-home mom, raising, small children and not really involved with other things than my own kids. And I received a notification from the school district that our boundaries were changing for my kids. And the boundaries were changing so drastically that we would bypass 4 elementary schools on bus for my kids to go to school. It was surprising and really frustrating at the time to kind of have that change just, thrown upon us as a neighborhood and a community. So I decided at that time to get involved. There was an open position at the school district, so I was able to get a job at the district. And then when a school board seat opened up, I filed for the seat and ended up winning. And now here I am 4 years later.
Now, we've had you on before as a member of the school board.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I imagine that was a shock when they said, okay, we're redistricting, we're moving you to this school, and you got to drive and weave through all the other parents going to the closer schools. And
How much time did they give you to adjust to that?
It seemed like it was like the next day. Legally, of course, now being more part of the process and understanding more of what goes on, I'm realizing that school boards actually have to give you 6 months notice. I don't remember it being that long, though. I believe it was only a couple months because it was the end of the school year, and then the following school year is when we would start at our new school. So how long is spring break? 2 months, 2.5 months, something like that. So
I imagine it was a bit of a shock, and maybe they didn't keep to those lines, but what are your thoughts now that you're inside the beast? What are your thoughts on how that decision was made? Do you see it more clearly now that you're inside? Have you been able to see the gears of the machine that brought clarity, or do you still kind of have a confusion about why it happened that way?
I still have confusion of why it happened that way. So as a state, we do have some laws that, of course, dictate how school boards come to some decisions. I think at that time, there was such a huge explosion of growth that the school board really didn't know how to manage it. They didn't know what their options were. So I'll give you a really good example. Stansbury's still experiencing a ton of growth, and same with Lake Point. Mm-hmm. So all of Lake Point students actually come into Stansbury and go to school. Because of that growth, we just barely finished a boundary review process in Stansbury, where our current area director actually took some of the information from what our future growth it looks like, what the current growth is, what schools were maxed out, who had portables. She talked to teachers. She talked to parents. Basically just brought in a ton of data and then presented the school board with more of a educated decision versus we think this is our best option. We're going to throw, this whole neighborhood to a different school, but we didn't have any data at the time to support why they chose that particular school. So we've come a long ways as a district over the last 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. There's been some changes at the district level as well, and I think that has helped. But then also, too, just being able to, manage some of the growth of where we can, and then taking that data and being able to analyze it and make sense of what's happening.
Well, yeah, I'm sure the board kind of had to grow with the district to. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's probably nothing nefarious about it except for general government agency nefariousisms, but I'm sure it was just that it happened and they just probably, I don't know.
It's hard to manage growth within some sort of parameter of restriction. Mm-hmm. If they say you can only have 5 students in a room, but you have 10, what do you do with the other 5? You got to figure something out, right?
Yeah. So
absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's kind of frustrating too, because right now the way the system's set up is we know growth is coming, right? Oh. And we all drive around, we can see the neighborhoods popping up, we can see the roads going in. So everyone goes, well, why don't we have a new school here? Or why are our classrooms so overcrowded? And then we say, well, we want to build a school, but you can't do it until the kids actually live here. So It's kind of reactive rather than being proactive. And as a school board, and taxpayers, it's frustrating because you want to be able to plan for the future, but we can't say, well, we need this school until we have 10 kids versus 5 kids in a classroom.
Mm-hmm. Right. Very true. And it's always reactive, not proactive. I mean, that's just the nature of our system.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's something I'd like to change. I don't like being reactive. I would rather be proactive. And I think now we have the technology and the skills and the data that it doesn't make any sense that we have to wait 2 years after kids are, being overcrowded in a school for us to actually start being able to look at processes or whatever the circumstances are. I think that that's something important that we can focus on the future more versus always waiting and, saying, oh, it happened. Now we have to react. Let's be proactive.
I don't think it's going to be possible. I mean,
I think
a representative republic is always a reactive system. You would have to have some sort of
I think the only way to be proactive is you say you live here. Because like Lake Point right now is building a lot of apartment style housing,
Right.
And so that could mean that you get, say in a 20 units, you get small families, 3 kids or senior citizens. Mm-hmm. And that's where the reactive part has to be. Because if you think ahead and you build a school, we're going to add on a capacity of 100 and you don't get that, you just burn through a whole bunch of taxpayer money that now you got to sit on. And our schools, no offense, are the biggest waste of money we have as governments. And let me ask you why.
Okay.
There's one not a block from here. I can throw a rock and hit it. Mm-hmm. What is it doing right now?
On a Friday night, it's sitting vacant.
It's burning energy. Mm-hmm. And it's going to burn energy tomorrow and the next day.
Right.
And then we're going to roll around here in about, 3 months, 4 months? And it's going to burn energy for 3 months straight. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying. Building schools is, one of those kind of complicated situations on that.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do that, that's why it's not like you're building something that has a one-time cost and it's done and it's over. You have something that has the biggest repetitive cost a government structure has.
Right.
And so that's...
Brazil actually addresses that issue by having shifts. The kids have shifts. So you'll be like you're the morning crew students, the nighttime crew students. I don't know if they do weekends, but
So, and that I would imagine that would be similar to year-round school, kind of, but instead of during the day, right? Is what you're saying?
Yeah, and that's if the teachers show up to teach also. I mean, they go on strike all the time in Brazil. But, it's interesting to see how different countries do it.
Yeah. The other thing, though, is, and I realize an elementary school is different, but our high schools are utilized, I would say 90% of the day and 90% of the year. I mean, there's kids and teachers and all sorts of organizations in those buildings all the time, especially in our community, because we don't have any other community centers or rec centers or,
That's true.
performing arts, whatever.
Maybe a test on cost effectiveness on having the gymnasium open during certain hours as a community gym that say costs $20.
People fight for that time, Jared. I know people who want to like do little kid sports with basketball and things like that, and they tell me the nightmare of trying to book time in that.
I would have it.
That's a popular activity.
I wouldn't have. I mean, you have certain times when kids have summer sports down there. You got the junior jazz and things like that. But the weight room, could that be opened up as a community gym? You pay a fee of $20 a month. We go over the mountain, and I mean, even Magna has a community rec center that costs $35 a month, and it's got all the amenities. And on this side, we're not yet offering that. Granted, we don't have the population of Magna and the well to draw from, but that at least would give a reason to continue to heat and cool the school. And you could have it open $20 a month, and there's kind of a restricted hour time that the general population can use it when it won't interrupt with the school activities. But I don't know. That's just a thought. Not that I'm calling for that, but maybe we should move on from schools and move on to the point in hand. Because I could go on about schools for a long time. I think no offense to anyone, I think our education system's broken right now. We have the most expensive education system in the world. But when last I looked, we're like I think it's like 112 on outcomes. Singapore is wiping the whole earth out. But a fascist nation can do some pretty extreme things.
They can definitely plan ahead.
Yeah, and they are.
That's true.
They are a particularly odd animal politically. But Asia is chewing us up. And half of Europe is chewing us up. And so, but we're outspending all of them combined. So we're failing somewhere. I have my opinions on that. I think that our teachers have turned away from academics and turned to activism more often than not. And I don't think parents want, we pay you, we give you 7-8 hours a day to prepare our kids to graduate school and be prepared to enter the world. And instead, you're going to chew up 4 of that 8 hours preparing those kids to hold a sign and wiggle it and scream about whatever's bugging them in an act that will be inconsequential for curing whatever's bugging them. Whereas if you academically get them going, they can design a cure.
Right.
But wiggling a sign is not a cure. Then you've got to find someone who's got the academic background to come in and get the cure done.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
I do. So the one thing of course I can't speak to, I guess, the country and education and funding that way. But one thing I can speak to is our state and our funding and the way the system is set up. So if you look at education funding for each of the school districts, there's a formula, right? And it's the WPU, the weighted pupil unit. And it goes into,
weighted pupil unit. So little fat kids are way up here. The little malnourished
No,
kids
so they'll take they have all kinds of, I guess, factors that go into the formula. So like kids who are at risk, who, you know, live in high risk areas, have high poverty, stuff like that, you'll usually end up getting a little bit more funding for, or special needs. If you have a child that has special needs, then you end up getting more funding. But they kind of take the average of all of it throughout the state, and there's like a page, if you look at it and pretend like up here is your minimum school program, and part of that's your WPU. There's some other things that go into it, but it's basically how much funding we receive from the state to keep the lights on at the schools, right? Or use energy rather. And then you have below the line is all of the stuff that's, I call it extra. It's not necessarily extra in some people's minds, because like a good example is transportation. We need transportation for our kids, but the state reimburses the district on part of those costs. So they count that below the line. We have 32 line items that are below the line, and the average state has 10 or less. So why does our state feel we have to regulate each of our school districts to the point of every single program versus, you know, let's give them the money, because we can look online, you can see a school district's budget, you can see all of that accountability side of it. But for whatever reason, the legislators feel they need to manage every nickel and dime of what goes into a school district. So then by the end of the day, none of that gets to our teachers, it doesn't get to classrooms, and it doesn't help any of our students. So my goal would be is, can we look at those 32 items? Do they help with academics? Where's the money going? Can we remove 20 of them and then see if we're really going to help our kids or not?
Do you think that was just maybe, I don't know, an autistic individual in bureaucracy just kind of overweighting stuff to the government side, and to the state government side, not letting the districts manage that? And is that maybe a hope if you get into the Senate to draw that back and maybe push some of these ideas down to the districts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a big part of it is, you know, every legislative session we see hundreds of education bills that come through, and for good intentions or not, I get it. You know, they think, well, we want this program in a school, but we have to fund it. But then, you know, my constituents as a legislator are going to say, well, wait, I've heard that you're not doing this program in my school. What's happening? Then they can turn around and they can go, no, look, I already funded it. It is going in this school. But the school districts are going, it's not enough. We can't do that program. There's not enough, or we're already doing this, whatever it is. And so we're losing that communication, and we're throwing money, like you said, you know, the highest in the world, but we're not seeing the outcomes because we don't even know where that money's going. You know what I mean? It's going towards all these programs that we don't know if they help or not. It's just being pushed out there for whatever reason. So yes, it's one of the things I would love to visit, and I would talk to other legislators and say, we've got to fix this. We've got to bring our school boards to the table and the state school board and say, you know, why so much red tape? Why do we need to have these restrictions? We need to let people do their jobs.
This might be a kind of a two-parter and idiosyncratic as to what we're talking about. But do you think, well, I wonder, has there been a measure on administration to educators done in the state of Utah? Is there like in our school district, we have 10% administrators or 5%, or are we running higher? Has that been done?
There has been a study, and we are actually quite a bit lower compared to, especially, of course, the big school districts along the Wasatch Front. When you look at how many students we have.
How are we on a general average across the state, or maybe even the whole U.S.?
That I don't know. Especially for the state of Utah. I mean, you have to realize you have, like, Paiute County, they have 219 kids. We have that in one grade. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So they have a school all to themselves for 219
they have
students?
a school district all for
That's
themselves.
a whole district, huh? Well, yeah. I mean, what I'm asking there is, the old saying when you work in industry is, a whole bunch of chiefs and not a lot of Indians.
Right.
And are we suffering that? Are we suffering that, we've got one chief and
The
four
tooth to
Indians?
tail effect is what we call it in the military. How many how many teeth do you have to tails? In other words, like infantrymen to administrators and logistics,
If you look at the size of our district, we actually have a smaller amount of administration compared to the other comparable size districts. But here's the thing, and it goes back to those 32 line items. That doesn't only affect administration, that affects your teachers.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So
But
if
that's
you're
also, those are also administration policies.
right. So
And
if
so
your
that's-
teachers are doing all of these hoops, right, so that they can get money for their classrooms, and then you say, well, as a teacher, I just want to teach, and then you say, okay, well, I'm going to hire administrator. That's where your administration costs go up. So if we can look at all of those, you're going to see everything go down, and hopefully student achievement go up because your students are receiving the money that they should be for their classrooms and to be able to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't know exactly what the issue is, but I still feel like the activism that we keep seeing coming out of schools, and this isn't just on TikTok, this is local teachers. I see them with their posts, and I'm not saying that they're doing something wrong. Again, we got to remember these teachers are taught this as well. But when you see that activism becomes a priority in their classroom, when I would like to see math, reading, writing, science, STEM,
Yeah.
gun safety.
And I can tell you, I mean, we just barely, I don't know if you guys know or not. So our previous superintendent resigned in November. So the school board just hired a new superintendent. We just officially announced it. Was it last week? Sorry, my days are blending together because most of my evenings I was doing meet candidate nights, and then I would interview superintendent candidates after that. So
Was there a reason why he resigned, or just he said it's time for me to go? Or
so there was a couple of different things. COVID was really hard for superintendents. We saw superintendents across the country retiring kind of earlier than they anticipated. The other thing is, on average, superintendents usually only last 2 to 3 years in a position or school district. Our previous superintendent had been there almost 9 years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Now was that Linares?
No, Dr. Scott Rogers.
Okay. I never met.
Yeah.
So last I knew of was Linares.
Yeah. So Linares was right before
Okay.
Rogers. So, and then, he just had some health reasons that I mean, it's the largest employer in our county, almost 2,000 employees, and it's a difficult job. That is for sure.
I'd imagine.
Yeah. So, we have a new superintendent, and I feel that the board made it pretty clear. Academics is the direction we want to go. We want that focus on our schools. We want to focus with our students and our teachers. There is a lot that goes into a classroom and classroom management, but the focus needs to be math, science, reading, and
we're not going to hang
decisions.
any other flags in there. We're not going to have any mock marches in there, because I want you to
we
know
had that
that I don't
in
know.
Tooele? I don't think we
I
have.
haven't heard of that happening. in
I
our
don't know.
county or school district.
But that's just, that's the words going around. Now, granted, I honestly don't think we have. And even the activist teachers I know around here would be considered stark raving conservatives in any major city.
Right.
I've got a cousin who used to teach in that Blue Man School in New York City.
No.
Oh,
Like
man.
the Las Vegas drummer group.
Well, it had a totally different theory on teaching. There was like no testing and stuff like it was interesting. It was more, kids would do what they want to do, and I guess
kind of a Montessori style, or
and I guess when it came to testing, when they did test, it didn't go so well. But
Is it still open?
I think it is.
so they lay out the 2 + 2 = not put the dandelion in your hair, put your shoes on, and
I got to get her on the show to talk about the experience.
that'd be interesting. Yeah. And there is some schools are well, let's face it. 2 years ago, school was a major tipping point for elections across the nation, and this year it's going to be an even bigger one.
Mhm.
It's a huge factor. We're seeing battle lines right now between the two parties are being drawn on schools and pro-choice, pro-life.
Mhm.
Seem to be the two battle lines being drawn. The Republicans and Democrats are just firing shots across the bow. Now, I have to say the Democrats are saying some pretty scary stuff with some of their mentions. Not that the Republicans aren't kind of going a little radical, but I'm always for, if you're going to go radical for control for the parents,
Mhm.
because by force of violence, the parents have to send children to the school. But they still carry all of the financial, medical, all the responsibility for said child. So don't leave them in the dark on circumstances.
Oh, absolutely.
And we don't see that a lot in Utah. And I think we see a little bit of rumblings against it out here in Tooele, but we don't see actual movement against it.
Mhm.
It's a big deciding factor. And I think it's gonna, we all know Democrats and Republicans decide which way their rhetoric's gonna be according to what the other one says.
Right.
And it's wild times. So with that, I've had a few questions that we're
already getting a lot of comments about teacher stuff. But before we dive into that, Jared,
okay.
Let's hear a little bit about your platform first.
Oh yeah, we didn't even go into that.
I think your past historical experience on the school board is interesting, but we're here to kind of promote.
We want to know about you being
the Senate District 1 Senate.
Well, it's interesting because people will ask me questions, and I love all of the questions I've been receiving, but to your point, Jared, it does go back to education almost every single time. It does. I talk about, you name it, somehow we end up on education. But I think that's a good thing. It's a priority not only for me as a mom and a school board member, but of course as a candidate, but it's also a priority for a lot of parents and a lot of delegates and, constituents, everybody.
I've never
moving
seen
forward.
so many moms fired up.
Right.
Never.
It's kind of taking the wind out of the sail of,
the
economy, everything.
I personally get messages day and night from moms in the county asking me, have I talked to this person? Do I know what's going on? Just because of the podcast, which I don't mind getting them. I answer as best I can.
Right.
But a lot of and it's mostly moms.
Right.
Because they're the ones that are going to feel the impact of home economics first.
Yeah, and they should be. And I think the thing that sometimes we forget, and this is something kind of with my platform and what I've been trying to talk to people is, of course, local control is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, especially when it comes to education, parents are in the driver's seat. We have some of the best parental laws in the country that protect our parents and our students because of how strong those laws are for parents, right? And I think sometimes, I don't know if parents feel intimidated or if school districts come across as intimidating, but I think that there's definitely a broken process that we need to figure out, and we need to get parents and school districts on the same page so that we're working together and not against each other, and help. If there is an issue in a classroom, the school district needs to know about it. And a lot of times you'll hear teachers, school districts say, but that's not happening in my classroom. And it may not be, but if it is happening somewhere, it can't just say, well, I heard from my friend and her daughter and their second grade kid, whatever. Like, let's find where these problems are and let's fix it and let's move forward so we don't hurt our children in the process. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that means we're at war, let's all fight, because we're not going to solve anything that way. And I think that's really where teachers want parents involved. They want them in their classrooms, and parents need to be in their classrooms and they need to be involved. I'm not saying they all need to go jump on the bandwagon of PTA or, the classroom parties, but go sit in and watch your teacher. If you sat in a classroom for an hour, you'll know really quick what's happening in that classroom. And then if there's an issue, talk to the principal, talk to our superintendent, and let's make some movement and make things better. So,
well, has there been any? Well, okay, couple things I've heard. I've heard nothing about Tooele, but the parents will see the news, and by seeing the news, they will, they'll get the information that's coming from the bigger cities where these crazy things are happening, and they're happening all the time. So that makes them nervous,
right.
And let's face it, in most cases, mother has to work as well. So she can't even make it into the classroom to see. So she's elected representatives to represent her and defend that.
Yep.
And maybe she's just preemptively holding the feet to the fire to make sure she maintains representation in that.
Yeah. So I can actually give you a really good example about exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if you guys remember, it was last fall, end of summer, maybe. There was a Canyon School District teacher who actually resigned because of a lesson that he was giving. It was called for the Second Step program. I'm sure you're familiar with
That's
it.
the social and emotional
learning programs.
Yeah.
So it's
What is that?
it's basically
That's one of our questions coming in for you. So
That sounds crazy.
tear it out. Lay it on the floor
so
right now.
And I actually will tie this into my platform as well, because I know you asked me about that. But anyway, so social and emotional learning it's been around forever. A lot of it, if you remember, when we were in school, it was like the DARE program, teaching kids not to do drugs,
Yeah.
different things like
failure.
that,
Yeah,
right?
Go on.
It's changed over the years. There's a lot more that now goes into it. Helps kids identify what bullying is versus fighting.
Can I ask you a question real quick on that?
Uh-huh.
So the DARE program and all the studies prove to have a negative effect on drug use in schools.
Right.
Tell me about the bullying. Have we done a study? Is there more bullying? How do you measure that, first of all?
Right.
And is there more now? Because the DARE program made it so there was more drug use.
Right.
Was all the studies came out and said, "Oh, stop this now, stop it.
Because you're introducing, this is what marijuana is at 6th grade instead of finding out at 9th grade?
I think what it is they came out and they labeled marijuana the same as cocaine. And a kid is going to come into contact with marijuana in high school. I don't care how shut in that kid is, they're going to come into contact with
especially with vaping and everything. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They're going to come into, and we don't even have to go vaping. That's a modern technology. We're talking in the 80s,
right.
the 90s, probably the 90s more so. They're going to come into contact with it.
Oh, yeah.
And they've been lied to by the authorities about the equivalence factor.
Right.
And so then everything the authorities said in that sentence, paragraph, classroom instruction is therefore defunct. And so they don't care. So use went up. That's my thought on why it went that way.
Well, it's because it's a chronic effect. I mean, come on, like everyone who was smoking marijuana in high school was cool. And then if they kept going until their like late 30s, they're a little slow and paranoid and live in the dark. So
I don't think you understood the statement I just made.
No, I totally get it. But I just want to state that, yeah, okay, nothing happens to you in the beginning of your childhood youth if you smoke some marijuana. You know, and they see that and they say, "Oh, this was a lie to me."
It's that they say marijuana kills people and all that. And you go to a party,
nobody dies,
and everyone's using it. And you go to another party and everyone's using it. And you hit the 5th party and you're like, "Screw it, I'm trying it."
Right.
And you come out of it okay. You come out of it with no ill effects. You come out of it with no addiction. You come out of it with none of that. And then 5% of those people come out of it and go, what if the things they said about heroin, which were more likely true,
weren't as true,
were also lies.
Right.
And then they try heroin. And cocaine and intravenous stuff.
So they turned marijuana into the gateway drug.
Yeah. When they should have in the instructions been forthright and honest. It says, hey, the issue with marijuana, it makes you feel good. It doesn't have any long-term effects, unless you have continual use, but it's illegal. And here's the crime effects you can have from it. The criminal charges you can gain from it. And they would have had a much better outcome. But when they came out, first of all, the government screwed that up by making it Schedule 1 from the start. Yeah. It should have never been Schedule 1. Cocaine is Schedule 4. Marijuana should not be Schedule 1.
So the reason why I brought up the DARE program is, and my experience with Second Step has really been just what my own children have brought home. And it's more along the lines, because the idea of Second Step is not to replace a parent or to be the only thing that kids are receiving information from. It's supposed to be something as a partnership. So for example, my second grader brought home a little booklet the other day, and it was talking about just her emotions. What does she do when she's frustrated at school, and how can she kind of calm herself down in the process? And so that's kind of more what I meant about the DARE program. Is it didn't go into that detail as far as drugs, but it was very much, so my seventh grader brought home one that talked about smoking or drinking versus, how we put these things in our body and stuff like that.
So it's social etiquette and health effects.
Right.
I get it.
And from your experience, has it been successful? Like when it talks to your child about, say, frustration at school, has it been successful on teaching them coping mechanisms? And
it has, and that's something, as much as, and I appreciate the statement you said earlier about focusing on academics, because I definitely agree that that's where we need to go. But we also have a lot of behavioral issues in a lot of our classrooms as well. And we seeing...
But can I make a point? I would bet that 99.999 of those behavioral issues are due to chaotic families. And I would bet that 99.998 of those, you can't second step them through that.
And I do agree with you on that. And I think that that's where it's so important that the parents are involved and they understand what is happening in the classrooms. But I also think that it has to be a partnership with the teachers too.
The parents,
right?
You're a parent. You have to step up and be squared away. The military has a way of dealing with that. They don't care if you come from drug-ridden gang neighborhood, they have an extreme structure and you're not allowed to mess outside the lines. Do I say schools need to be that way? No, but
right.
I need to be tried in some places.
Well, and that's when, I guess that's something we have to look at going forward,
because
right?
we've got this second step and we still got screwed up schools.
Right.
And if it's been around for a long time, we've still got screwed up schools.
Well, so second step hasn't been around for a long time, but the
ideas
right.
And we've still got screwed up schools. I'm telling you, it roots at the family.
Yeah.
Because the family, when they're in school, they're around so many peers, so much structure. It's organized. Yeah, you get outliers of the teacher that takes a kid in the hallway and works them over, which was common when I went to high school.
Can you imagine?
Here we go to the boiler room.
Well, you've probably heard of Terrell Hunsaker.
Right.
He didn't play around.
Yeah.
He throws stuff at you, bit my ear.
I got bare butt spanked when I was in first grade in front of the class.
I was in 10th.
It was rough, man.
I was in 10th grade. And I was talking in class and he bit my ear. He'd come up, you'd feel breath on your ear for a split second.
The teacher?
Oh, yeah.
He bit your ear.
And he won.
All right, you got me beat.
He won Teacher of the Year like 8 times.
Teacher of the Year?
Wow.
You mean Teacher of the Ear?
Maybe I understood. But no. And he was also county commissioner. The same Hunsaker.
Okay.
But you didn't play around in his class.
Right.
And he made successful. He taught ag mechanics.
Okay.
There weren't females in any of his classes.
Right.
And I'm not that old. This was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And he didn't let females in his class. And he got a lot of flack for it, but he had the credentials to fight
Back
back.
it up.
Biting the ear it's I don't know. That's different, man. That's different.
Yeah. Well, anyways, different story. There's probably a few people in the audience who.
Okay, so we know what the social second step programs
so
are.
back to my story. So a teacher in Canyon School District ended up resigning because he was finding there were links that were on the lessons that he was teaching the students that were very inappropriate. And so he was upset and ended up resigning. As soon as our
When
school
you
district,
say inappropriate, what do you mean?
they were talking about like how to respond after the first time you've had sex and different
And what
things
age?
like that.
What age range?
That I don't know. I want to say they were 8th or 9th graders, maybe. But our school district only uses a program up to 8th grade. So I don't.
So a 9th grader, all right. I'm
Right.
sure there's plenty of 9th graders that are, though the studies coming out now is virginity's lasting into its 20s. So
Yeah.
the internet has fixed that, but
Interesting. Okay.
I would say anything middle school and below, I don't know.
In my mind, it shouldn't be happening at schools at all. That's a
Well,
parent conversation.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. I do think when you get into high school, you start hitting a gray area on stuff. Because, I mean, how old are your kids? Any high schoolers yet?
Yeah. I have a senior this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much communication does said senior give you?
Not much. We do talk about a lot of things, but
You do. And you
We're pretty
may
open.
think it's pretty good communication,
I know it's not.
but his best friend knows a lot.
Right.
You
Actually, I bet his girlfriend knows more.
His best friend knows more than her.
Okay. That's fair.
I mean, unless he's, crazy.
Right.
Don't kid. Don't do it. Shouldn't be. Yeah. But
Right.
anyways, his best buddy will know a lot.
Right.
And so maybe in high school things can start be introduced, but I think below that you want to drive them to the parents.
As long as there's a consent note, like I had health studies where they told you how to put a condom on and things like that in high school. I remember that. And I don't remember if there was a consent note though, but I think that's a good idea. Like let the parents say yes or no, they can do this.
So here's my thought on it is, and I agree with you, as parents should be involved in it. What I don't think and who I don't think should be involved are legislators. I think these decisions all need to come from our parents and our school boards working together and saying, this is what's right for our community. Our high school kids, yes, let's talk about X, Y, and Z. Or you know what?
So like Tooele, you talk about the STDs. Stansbury, you talk about how to invest your money. Grantsville, you tell them, the different types of sheep they're going to encounter in their trip.
Well, I would think as a district you would want it consistent, but I'm just saying maybe we don't need to have such liberal conversations as maybe Salt Lake School District has.
Yeah.
I would think our conversations could be a little bit more conservative and on the more of the parent side versus if Salt Lake wants to talk about whatever they want to talk about, let's let them decide that and not let our legislators decide that for us.
So you want to take the power of the state legislation and funnel it down towards maybe county level.
Mm-hmm.
So the 10th Amendment effect, I like that.
Or furthermore, that's kind of like a 9th and a half amendment. That's beautiful.
But do you feel that way about other issues? Anything else besides school power?
Pretty much everything.
So alcohol, because the DABC is so connected to our schools. Should
Wait. I'm actually curious. How do you say the DABC is connected to schools?
your funding?
No.
Yeah.
Funding comes through income taxes for education.
I was told that the DABC allows a lot of funding for schools.
No. So I would imagine the DABC provides sales tax, which the sales tax actually funds our roads and all that kind of stuff. Where, right,
Oh,
if you
good.
look at
So
the
you
Utah,
buy alcohol and you fun stuff you can't use while
Right.
using the alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that the DABC, there is no link between the sales of alcohol and the funding of our Utah schools.
Right.
So I was misinformed on that then.
If you look at the Utah Constitution, you'll actually see there's a earmark that says income taxes goes towards education, and they want to change it. They want to remove that earmark so that legislators can get to that fund because there's so much money in it right now, and they want to use that funds for other things.
So there's a lot of money in there. It sounds like they haven't been utilizing that money for childhood education then.
I wouldn't say they've
So who's
used-
in control of the spigot that lets that money build up to where legislatures start drooling?
the legislators are in charge of all of it. So they receive reports that say let's just say $500,000 in the education fund or income taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then $500,000 in sales tax. That's not true. It's actually more like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they receive all the bills or the requests for programs or funds, whatever you want to call it. And then they have to balance out that budget and decide where all the money is going to go. So they decide if there's not enough money for roads, then they'll say, well, we've got to take some of the income taxes or the education fund and use it for roads or
Right.
for higher education or whatever.
So then in that case, then like, how would you see? I always thought education and the DABC were very well connected in terms of funding sources. So if
Just
that's
on
not
Friday
the
and
case,
Saturday nights.
if that's not the case,
Prom.
where do you stand on the DABC in Utah?
Going to get shot. It's wrong. It's a sin tax, and we're overtaxed on, of course, our alcohol, liquor across the state. The idea, so my mom loves wine. She can't order any wine from California and have it shipped to her home. She has to have it sent to the local liquor store and then go pick it up and
At a
pay
20
like what, 3 times what
It's
it
a
costs.
28%
Yeah.
percent immediate tax right on top of it.
And then also not only on top of that, it's not a free market. The idea that, well, actually, let me ask, have you been to the liquor store off of 45th South and like, what is that west? Like 700th West?
No, is it a nice one?
It is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like I walked in there and I, for the first time, didn't feel like a criminal walking into a liquor store. I don't drink. I was there for my mom to buy her a bottle of wine, but it was open. It was bright. People were laughing and they were smiling, and it was surprising.
What's this address again?
4500 South and like 7th West. It's just
Okay.
there off the freeway. It's actually by the new state of Utah like office buildings and stuff.
Okay.
It's where the American Express building used to be. I
Okay.
don't know if you
Uh-huh.
guys, yeah.
We'll visit that tomorrow.
Yeah, but it reminded me of Harmon's. Have you guys been into the new Harmon's? That's kind of the design. But it also made me sad because how many years have liquor stores just been that cement 4 walls that you walk in? And,
Remember? Well, you probably don't remember Twilla's old liquor store.
Mm-mm.
Neither of you remember that. You know where the Big Rods and Arby's is, right?
Right.
And you know, you drive down the road. Now there's that little used car lot.
That was once a
Oh.
Bitcoin mine.
That was our liquor store
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it's tiny. It's,
Yeah.
you know, you had to like park in back, put on your overcoat, your fedora.
Well, see, and I think it's wrong. I mean, we have a lot of people who are coming to our state from out of state, right? That's the way they live their lives, you know? And so if you go to the liquor store out in Draper, if you go there anytime after 3 p.m., the line literally wraps around the building, and it's embarrassing. It shouldn't be that way. And
Looks like communism.
yeah, you know,
Well,
and
we're-
the fact they're taking seltzers now out of the grocery stores and putting them,
Yep.
it's just wrong.
I think we're going to see all that change with the incoming populace, over the next 10 years.
I really like that answer, Camille.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's good. So what other motivations do you have as far as running for Senate?
So of course we talked about education, and then the DABC was not a motivation, but I'm glad you brought that up. Another big driving factor, though, for me was redistricting. After kind of seeing how the maps were drawn and that we didn't get our own Senate seat, it was time for me to decide, do I run for school board again? There was the thought of actually running for the representative seat, so Merrill Nelson's old seat. I thought about that, and then I kept hearing, conversations that, Twila didn't get their own Senate seat like what we were promised, and that we would never have our own seat because we don't have the participation or, of course, at this point, I guess the delegates. And so I kind of took it almost as a personal challenge of, you can't tell us that we'll never have our own Senate seat. I'll throw my name out there. I will do everything I can. And hopefully, I'll have the support to back me up and get us that seat. So
let me ask you about this. I know they don't pay very well for these representative slots.
Right.
So it's kind of like, it's a side hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a front hobby? Do you have a full-time job you got to attend to?
No, I have 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Here's kind of the sad thing is, in a way, I'm getting a pay raise because school board's only $3,000 a year. So I wouldn't say I'm like, yay, I'm really excited. But yeah, no, right now I have a very supportive husband who.
That's awesome.
Who sometimes hates me for all of the fun things I put our family through, but he works really hard and he says go and do, and let's see what happens. So.
And that's just FYI. I for the audience, that is something I look at as a delegate. Like, I want to know, hey, what's your time structure like as an individual if you're going to represent me? Because if I'm not a religious person, the closest thing to gods I have on this planet are the lords that master over me. So I really take the experience of electing my lords and masters seriously. Mm-hmm. And one of those things
that's a disgusting yet true statement.
Don't you love the way I put it?
Oh,
but so like how much time a person has to put forward in lording a population of peasants is important when you're going up for that seat.
That's a catch-22, because in one way you want them to not get that and then become reliant on being committed to holding that position. You want them to have some means outside, whether it's the husband's income or they have their own career and this is a side gig. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it is a catch-22. But if they do have more time, then I don't know. I've got no weight on that. Me personally, I think I'll just be honest. I think the government could go away tomorrow and we would finally see peace and prosperity.
Right.
The government is the thing that holds us back from finding those things in life, and that includes inner cities and all that.
So the peasants are lighting the torches,
okay, yeah,
and sharpening the pitchforks.
Let's run through some real quick questions. What's your thoughts on First Amendment issues, like freedom of speech? Like what McKay did in that deal that made all the big kerfuffle and made me and Dave both notoriously wrong on our thoughts and statements.
I don't know what you're talking about.
When McKay just kind of rewrote rules for meetings he was having in there.
Oh, who wants to challenge the medal of the chair statement?
Yeah.
Do you remember seeing that?
No.
Oh, you
I don't know
got to
what
see.
I'm sorry.
So there's this guy, Mike Brown, and he was wearing a sticker, and he got kicked out of a meeting.
That's all. It said vote.
Yeah, it was.
What? Wait, I'm sorry. What meeting was it, though?
I think it was on HB 60.
Okay.
But McKay, as he started the meeting, and honestly, I think it was just so McKay could delay the meeting so that he could shelf the issue and not have to deal with it, because the Senate was closing down in like 3 days.
No, okay.
So
no,
what are your thoughts on freedom of speech?
So I think freedom of speech it can be tricky, right? It's the First Amendment, should be protected. People should be able to say or demonstrate, right, peacefully in different processes. With that being said, though, freedom of speech goes both ways. Just because I say you can say whatever you want, then that means I can say whatever I want, right? And I think sometimes we forget that. So I hate to bring it back to education, but I'm going to bring it back to
No,
education.
and I'm telling you, all our questions on here are about education.
Right?
So you're fine.
So a big concern or question that a lot of people in education are talking about right now is you have books in libraries that are inappropriate, right?
Okay. Now, is this in school libraries or public libraries?
Both.
Okay. You have to separate the two. Because again, I go
Aren't
back
they
to
the same?
No.
Oh,
A school library, you are forced by law, by force of violence, to send your child to that building. A public library, you are not forced to send your child to that building.
But a taxpayer funds both of those buildings.
That's fine. But them going into one is a fully voluntary action. Them going into the other is an involuntary action where the parent still carries legal liabilities for that child. So if that child goes into a library where they're forced to go in there. Now, if the library over there on, what is it, First West, starts rounding up kids on, weekday afternoons at 4:00, and you can be fined by the courts for your kid not getting round up, changes that. But right now, kids that go in there are either A, not telling their parents about it, or B, their parents know about it. And a good parent will be, if that child is underage, of appropriate age to see that stuff, will be accompanying said child.
Right.
But the school library, different animal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
there is no bus that picks up kids to go to the library.
Right. And I do understand that, but I'm just thinking, if I didn't want my child to go into the library, I know I could walk into the classroom, school board member or not, and say, I don't want my child in the library. And they would say, okay, there's an alternative.
You've got to preemptively do that after they've already,
right,
by force of violence, taken your child to that building.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
It's
a whole different animal.
Right.
So you cannot put those two together.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about...
And they may work together.
Right.
And they may borrow books with each other. And I think there should be a filter written into where inappropriate books cannot be borrowed from the public library and taken to the school library.
Right.
And I'm all about control that school library, because I'm all about giving parents total control.
Right. And I know I had a friend actually bring up the idea of, not even controlling as so much as the school library, but even the content, kind of like a label rating system, right? We have it for TV shows.
Sure.
We have it for everything. So why do we not have it for books?
Sure, we can do. I would honestly say anything that meets rated R doesn't go into high schools.
Right.
There can even be a Dewey Decibel drawer. They pull out the card to look up that latest saucy, spicy thing.
When was the last time you were in a library?
that all their friends are talking about.
Do they not have those anymore?
No.
I know they don't, but
those are the coolest things.
But they can pull it out. It can say, 50 Shades of Gray, and it could say, must go to the public library. And then the public librarian honestly should put controls on how those are taken out. That's fine. But, I don't want to restrict the First Amendment for the public to protect the kids. And I don't want damaging materials to get to the kids when the kids have been stripped from their parents by law.
Right. See us planting seeds in your mind.
Right. You worded it way better than I did.
Yeah.
But that's what
when the issue first came up, I too said, this is crap I don't want in the libraries. Then it's like, there is a difference between a public library and a school library. You're literally, it's an institutionalized captivation of your child for the school libraries, and those I feel should be controlled. But how do you feel, I guess, is the big question.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think that the school libraries, like I said, there needs to be some kind of rating system, right? And I think this is one of the cases, at least I feel like, where our laws aren't catching up to almost the evils of the world, right? When you look at some of the laws or some of the things on the books, like I think about technology is another good example, right? When COVID first hit, there wasn't a law on the books that people could have open meetings online. because no one ever thought, oh my gosh, we're going to go through a pandemic. We all need to be online. So nothing was ever created that way. And I think that's another example with the school libraries. No one ever thought, or with the public libraries, as freedom of speech, I can write whatever I want. I can put this book wherever I want, where in reality, we need to look at it and say, we didn't know or think that you were going to put pornographic materials in our school libraries. And that's where we need to take that
How did they
step
get
back.
in there? Was that just we're going to buy every book that comes down the pike and put it in our library? Or was it maybe...
I don't know. I don't know the answer.
That's a big question. How'd they get in there? Because I know when I was in school, I don't know. Let's be honest. I didn't learn to read till I was like 30. So the library was a place I went to when we walked through it to go to somewhere else or get school pictures done. Right. Never drew a book out of the school libraries on my own volition.
Well, and I mean, I don't know. I think about tagging, right? Like on social media, right? And you have tags for like art, right? And maybe what's art to you is pornography to me, right? But if you tag it as art, I could see how it would get into a library. But I don't know the process. I don't know how that ends up from point A to point
So we need what we need is a process then to judge and a system to rate.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know
like
that's something our district has been working on for a while. And I know there's Bones one. Yeah.
That's got to be a big job.
Right.
To go through every book out there.
Yep.
I mean, you got the first person flips the pages. If it has pictures, then they got it. And then the next person has to read the dang thing.
Yeah.
And see if it's in there.
And I know that's something, again, I talked with the new superintendent about is, when it comes to curriculum and books and all that, I think we need to have a parent committee, or at least half the committee be parents so they can be involved and read the books and say,
is there a way
this is inappropriate or whatever.
Is there a way that we're responsive to parents if they bring up an issue that maybe a kid brought a book home that slipped through the cracks? A parent comes in and says, hey, look, is that something that can be acknowledged and corrected, let's say within 24 hours?
But can it also be weaponized? Can it say, oh, this book has a article about Donald Trump in a positive direction. Let's put it through the parent committee and the socialist committee, and bang, there you go. Your kids become instant Democrats.
No, they're both good questions. I don't think they've gotten to that process yet. At least I didn't read it when I was going through the policy.
That's a complicated. I would hate to be the person who has to design and operate that process.
Yeah,
that's a feat.
But I know. So I actually, during the legislative session, I meet with other school boards and their superintendents, and we review a lot of the education bills. And Washington School District is the one who brought this up because they had removed books out of their school library.
What is that school called? I forget the name of it now.
I don't know which school it was. I just
there's a whole committee that came out about it.
Yeah.
A whole thing. And
that's they ended up getting sued.
What do you do like when it comes to an encyclopedia?
Right. Well, and that's where I said, as our school board member, I said, this is where Tooele County needs to develop something for our county, what's important for our parents, and maybe our parents will look at an encyclopedia and say, that's okay. I don't know. I don't know how you define those lines, but either way, I didn't want to sit around and wait for Washington or Canyons or other districts to say, oh, let's all go at this together. No, we're going to get ahead of the game. We're going to start working on it now. So we have a process in place. So we know what to do when an inappropriate book falls through the cracks, whether it's supporting Donald Trump, whatever, right? So then that way we're not playing favorites and we have those things taken care of.
Yeah, you got to come up with the structure. These are the no-go things.
And I'm telling you, this is how they weaponize it.
It's just
they get us with the children. Oh, we got to protect the children, and somehow they're going to sneak something through the crack.
This is a question I asked a friend of mine who was up in arms about this.
Okay.
He's completely on the left, a good, decent, honest guy. But I said, how would you feel if behind your back your son started reading Mein Kampf? And that's a big question. How would you feel? Would that make you uncomfortable? You know, if behind your back he's doing it, and you know, because it's available. And that's a big question. So you got to look at it across the spectrum. I think I have a nuanced view on the approach to all the sexuality issues that seems to be the hot button right now. I don't think those should be a case for a teacher to try to justify to children. I also, I don't think that gender or orientation questions should be a status to get a book removed. I think it's only when it crosses lines into explicit content. That's me. And my kid's 27. So most parents don't agree. And let's face it, 99, I can do not 0.99, or we can just know where I'm going with this, disagrees with me on political and economic and ethical standards anyway.
Well, but I think that's where it's important that we all know we're in the United States, right? Mm-hmm. And we all have our own rights. So I think back, and I know this is a bad example, but with COVID, right? Regardless of what the school board decided as far as when it was time to go back to school, there was no way we were going to make everybody happy.
No.
Right? And we had millions of options to look at. We could look at hybrid options. We could look at not going back. We could look at going back face to face. It didn't matter. There was going to be someone mad, right? Mm-hmm. But what it came down to was, regardless of what the school board voted on, as a parent, I have to do what's best for my child, no matter what. And if that means I have to go in and talk to the principal or talk to the superintendent and say, I don't want my child in this environment, or I don't want this, the school's going to work with you. They're going to try and do what they can.
Can I throw out an idea? Uh-huh. Continue on with the whatever plans bigger brains than mine are coming up with. But is there any way that whenever a child checks out a book in the school library, the parent can receive an email with the name of the book and maybe a synopsis that pops it over to the website, where they just like the just a hyperlink to the website for the book, and the parent can say, "Oh, okay." Yeah. And
I'm sure there is. I don't know for sure, but
peace of mind is had. And if peace of mind is not had, then the parent can go draw that book, either get it from little Timmy,
right?
You know, not little Johnny, because we know his parents aren't paying attention. I've seen those jokes. That's a chaos household. Right. But little Timmy or little Bethany, whatever, and then review it for themselves, or just get ahead if they got to deal with any complicated discussions.
And they could also leave like a comment or a rating. Like, okay, my child was reading this Donald Trump book. I'm going to give it a negative rating and put it on the naughty list from my personal perspective. That way, when the next student checks it out,
so you're saying the name of the teacher is Hippie McFlower Butt doesn't like
Hippie McFlower.
Yeah, that way there's just more people involved with giving their opinion.
No, and that would be good. But I would like to see it, just even to the Amazon site, because Amazon gives pretty decent synopsis of the books.
That's what I was thinking about when you said that review. I was thinking of Amazon. And
just say, you can go through the reviews, but it also gives an outline of the book.
I just have the best idea ever.
You don't have ultimate authority to burn the book as a committee, but you have no opportunity to remove the comments that the parents make. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that way the information's public.
Yeah.
We should create this program and then sell it and make a ton of money.
Gangbusters.
And then you can buy alcohol with Bitcoin, have it delivered to your house.
Or Litecoin, depending on if you're buying vodka. Oh, you can't buy vodka anymore. They're the bad guys. What do Ukrainians make? Probably vodka as well.
Yeah.
So.
They don't make much right now.
Yeah. Right. But anyway, so no, those are good answers. And I don't know why you're nervous about chatting with us.
No, actually, this has been really great.
It gets fun after a while, doesn't it?
I was like,
I got so many.
I'm like, how many comments are we?
And we've got.
Don't worry, that was our first one.
Okay.
We've got some up here that we need to run through. Okay, so. Linda asked, what is her solution to books with pornography in the school library, stickers, or QR codes?
We just did that.
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Consider that.
I think no pornography in school libraries, period.
Right.
Just cut and dry. No, and I would do it on a graduated scale per, high school, middle school and elementary school age, things
Right.
like that. How do you feel about local school districts and Utah school board teachers breaking away from national union groups?
So, and I've kind of talked about this in other conversations. So, our school district, we actually have a higher participation of teachers a part of the union than most school districts do across the state. I'm not sure why we have higher participation, but we do. But as school board member or legislator, not my job to tell them whether they can join a union or not. I feel like that's something as a parent or even, community member, I would talk to the teachers, find out why they feel they need to be part of the union, what benefits they receive, maybe what disadvantages, whatever it is.
But it's an optional choice for the teacher at this moment in time to join the union
Absolutely.
or not.
In
Yeah.
this state.
It wasn't always that way, was it?
In this state, it's always been.
Yeah,
This
I
is
was
a
gonna
right to work
say.
state.
And I do know, so my husband is actually a Teamster, so we're pretty familiar with various union laws. And one of,
So can he tell us where Hoffa is? Just throwing it out
right? I actually, yeah. So no,
there. Not that you know of.
right? Not that I know.
Does he have
may.
like a quiet room where every once in a while he just goes and screams into a pillow?
Not yet. But we were looking at the federal labor laws for unions, and I found out our public, so schools, are not restricted by the same laws. So there's different laws for your public institutions versus, Teamsters and the other unions that are out there. But
I'm not a fan of public unions. That's
Right.
unfunded. That is a union that's unaccountable to the customer at all. So they just tend to have the more possibility to run away.
well, and it is frustrating because they're negotiating over taxpayer dollars,
Yeah,
right?
they're negotiating over theft.
And instead of profits or something else along those lines. So I can tell you, from being on the school board a few years ago, I don't know if you guys, so you have your classified employees and your certified. Classified are more like janitors, secretaries. They usually work part-time, bus drivers,
The
right?
non-teacher,
Right.
the non-certificate, I think is what it's called.
Right. And the first year I was on the board, negotiated with them, and we worked out a raise and it went through. The second year, they didn't have 50% of the membership in order to negotiate. So the district made the final recommendation, and all of those employees ended up with a higher raise because it was, spread across all of the employees versus just
Is it visible
more
that my
tenured.
jaw's on the floor, people? That people without a union fared better? We're just
So,
throwing it out there.
I mean, I definitely think it does depend on, private versus public organizations. But again, it doesn't matter where I'm at. If school board or legislator, I can't say you can't do that.
Yeah, when they were whipping employees with sticks and stuff like they do in like some other countries, I could see the benefit of unions, you
in
know?
Soviet countries and socialists, in fully unionized countries, yeah.
Well, just yesterday I read an article. There was some anger at a Chinese man holding a large stick hitting an African employee in Africa. So they're in Africa hitting their African employees, and I'm referring to the Chinese that are in Africa.
So
And I could see a
CCP
reason why he would want to unionize at
in
that.
socialist-tied countries, in socialist
Right.
ravaged.
But if you're already a socialist government, do you need unions? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's when it all becomes one union, and then you have struggle sessions to make up what unions tend to do otherwise. But okay, so what you're saying to answer that question is you really can't. I think she's. What's your personal feelings on a lot of our teachers leaving the national union, the NEC?
I think that's their decision.
Do you think it's a positive thing?
In a lot of ways, yes. I think that the direction that the national unions in some ways are going, it's not benefiting us. It's not benefiting our teachers.
Or the students.
Or the students, right?
Or the nation.
You
Yeah.
save on the union dues. I mean,
Right.
That's an extra $30 or $50 in your pocket.
Yeah.
That's always a positive thing.
Right.
Linda laughed about the weighted pupil unit. That's the fat kid unit.
Yep.
You can call that behind closed doors. I won't say anything bad about it. Any plan for water conservation?
So it's interesting because Senate District 1 is half of Tooele County, right? Grantsville and Stansbury Park. And then it's all of Box Elder County and half of Cache County.
So it goes all the way to the end of the state line and then over and cuts into a little bit of Cache.
Yep.
Okay.
And of course, everyone
So you're going to have some way out there areas.
Oh, yeah.
Like Grouse Creek and places
Yep.
that people live that nobody knows about.
Right. I'm actually really looking forward to it. I've been up there a few times just visiting and talking with people. It's gorgeous area. It's beautiful to drive through.
Really is a sneaky, pretty part of Utah, isn't it?
Right. So, and my father-in-law actually lives up in Idaho. He used to live just outside of Preston. So we drove up there a lot until my mother-in-law passed away. But it's somewhere we've always talked about retiring, building a home, doing something like that, kind of bouncing two homes back and forth kind of a thing. But it's just beautiful up there. But everyone is concerned about water conservation. I don't know if you guys saw the legislators passed a $40 million bill to research the Great Salt Lake this session. Which
Go out and walk across it, and it's dry.
I'm trying to understand, and I'm trying to be really nice about it. But
Hey,
I
you know
don't
what?
know.
They can pay me. You know what? I will walk across it for.
I saw a cool program online where they put solar panels on the body of water, and this prevents dehydration of that body of water and provides solar energy.
So it prevents solar, and
Right.
You've also got to control the wind because wind is a part of evaporation. But we could get big tarps, big blankets now.
So I saw a thing where they took these black rubber balls and put them in, and I'm trying to figure out, doesn't black absorb the sun, and wouldn't that increase the evaporation?
Maybe it may be something that doesn't build up and disperse heat.
Okay.
But it could have the color black, which is the black does absorb the sun. So the sun isn't having a refractory.
It doesn't hit the water.
The material component is probably more important than the color component.
I do know that the Great Salt Lake may be bone dry, but it's got about, on average, 20 feet deep of semi-pliable salt, and then it's mud under that.
So, but what I'm hearing, though, is because of the way it's drying up, it's affecting the salt, which is affecting the businesses along there. There's a part of me.
The reason it's affecting the salt is we have all solar salt out here. So what they do is they have ponds, they flood the pond, trap the water, the evaporation happens, leaves the mineral behind. They flood another layer on, evaporate, and they continually do that. But we're not able, our different industries, including Magcor, which is the only place on earth that good magnesium is made at this time.
Okay.
That's the reason why we have the most polluting thing in the country in our county.
I wondered about that.
Because it's the only place it's ever been able to make.
Okay.
They tried it in China. They tried it in Russia. They tried it in South America. And it's all dog poop. Only here is it good. And it's an important mineral.
To quality.
But anyways, and a lot of that is because of the processes we use where they cut corners. But a lot of that is also the value of the mineral they're pulling out. But so you've got, so they're not able to get water to flood the ponds, to flood the areas to concentrate. So that's where our issues are coming from, on the lack of water.
So you should get that $40 million because I think you just solved the problem.
Well, we could build a pipeline to the ocean and pump water into the lake.
They have talked about building pipelines.
Have they really?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I was just
most of your
fantasizing.
table salt doesn't come from the Salt Lake,
Right.
because it comes from cleaner sources. The ocean is a popular one right now, but a lot of it's mines back east. They've got underground mines. You've probably seen, History Channel videos on it. And it because of the process of getting that salt, it's cleaner on the other end.
Yeah. But I would have I personally, I would have rather have seen them take instead of $40 million. And I do understand the Great Salt Lake and the importance of it. But maybe 20 million and maybe use another
40
20
million
million
is a lot.
Yeah.
Of money to
For
study.
water conservation,
is
starting
this
in Box Elder and all the way down.
Is this just for a study, or is this
Just for a
earmarked?
study.
Walk across it for $250,000. I'm
Right.
walking. I will leave tomorrow.
Yeah.
But 40 million. Now to come up with the solution, I know they've been talking about the Bear River project. They've been talking about how to bring water from other areas that aren't so. And let's face it, everything west of the Rockies right now is in a deep drought.
Right.
Everything.
Yep.
I mean, there's not a place west of the Rockies that isn't into not a record-breaking drought, but a drought since we started keeping records.
Right.
You know.
And it's severe. I mean, I don't know. So we're pretty avid boaters and we go down to Lake Powell every year. And I think
Pond
last time,
Pal?
Huh?
Pond Pal?
Yeah, Pond Pal.
Yeah.
What, it's at 25%. And that's scary, you know, and they're still letting water out. And I mean, even looking at all of our reservoirs last year, I would have loved to have seen, you know, solar panels or something to help protect or keep some of that water around. But we didn't see any of that happen this year. So hopefully
we do need to look at something like that.
we
Because
do.
remember, with the Great Salt Lake going away, that's also a disappearance of the aquifer water tables and all
Yep.
that other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right.
Good question.
Okay, back on got to roll down. The teachers that come in from Salt Lake City to work out here. So it will be here if you don't see it now.
She's referring to the liberalism.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's true. And maybe, hopefully, it's the teachers coming out here to start to escape from that.
Well, either way, again, it's something I have talked to the new superintendent about. And again, I mean, he was just appointed last Friday. So he's in the process, though, of providing consistency across the district. So each teacher does know the expectations, they, what allowable, you know, what's in their classrooms, flags, whatever, versus what's not, curriculum, lesson planning, all of that, so that we don't have rogue teachers, I guess, you know, and, you know, just because if it's okay in Salt Lake doesn't mean that it's okay out here, so that those expectations are set and they understand that.
Good.
Do you ever think we hire a teacher because of their profile? Like, oh, we don't have a transgender teacher. How cool would that be? Let's hire that person over another person. Do you think there's ever any of that going on?
I would like to say no, because it would be against the law, but I mean, each school building right now does their own hiring. So I don't think I could speak for 26 buildings. But again, it is against the law. So I
You
would,
can't even ask it. Remember that discussion we had the other night? You can't even ask if someone's married. So
right.
you better not come in and say, you know, oh, when did you change?
Yeah.
Well, I know there's laws and stuff in the government that provide quotas. Like, you need this many black people, you need this many women, you need this many midgets with one arm that are of Oriental descent. So, you know, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you think school
So
districts
maybe
could-
there is a quota,
I've never heard of that quota, but
but you don't do the hiring as well.
right. Yeah. The only person that the school board hires is the superintendent. But I would imagine if there was that kind of quota, it would have to come down again through the legislators. And yeah, I don't see that. Going
Now,
over
some
well
of
with
that's
anyone.
federal quota, and we are held hostage by federal money quite a bit.
Not as much as you think. It's 8% is what we receive.
8%?
Mm-hmm.
I think we can do away with 8%. Let's
I do
get the
too.
federals out. Bam.
Yes.
That is the answer I
will
wanted
drink
all
to that
night.
too.
Yeah. I'm out of my beer. I'm gonna have to get a water. Anyway,
that was one of my last swigs. I think I got 2 more.
okay. Heather asks, do you think that critical race theory is taught in Utah schools?
I don't, but that's not to say there's not a rogue teacher out there. Again, that's where I think it's important that we bring up those examples. If it is somewhere, if I know a lot of people say that second step is an umbrella to bring it into the schools. If there's examples, whatever, that's where school board members, principals, superintendents need to be made aware of it. So my other story I was telling you earlier with the Canyon School District, when all of that happened with the third party links and the issues,
So like they clicked on a link and it went to like Debbie Does Dallas and like, how did that get in there?
Yeah. Well, so that was what, as a district, we looked at the links and went back to the company and said, first of all, block all of those links from the websites and all of our servers and everything. And then they asked, how did these links get on there? And I'm trying to remember if the company said that they had given some permission to a third party partner, or either way, they were removed and they weren't allowed in our system.
So
anymore.
that wasn't even, so that wasn't a district level thing. That wasn't a national school level thing. Although the National School Board may have suggested this company, but that was like a third party contractor.
Mm-hmm.
You see how this stuff can slowly creep in without you even noticing it's there,
Well, and what,
like a virus.
what's happened
I'm
since
glad
then,
the teacher caught that.
right?
Because that teacher is the hero. He's the bulwark that
Right.
stopped that.
So what's happened since then now is it's empowered even more teachers, if, you know, as they're looking at the program, if they see something that's inappropriate or third party or whatever, they know exactly who now to contact at the district office and, you know, to get it removed and taken care of.
So that teacher didn't have to resign,
No.
which I'm sad that he or she did, because we lost a teacher who was very astute, paying
Right.
attention.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know all of the circumstances, you know, maybe his personal life or what was happening even within his own district. But I know in our district, if there are examples, we want to know about them, you know, and talk to the principals, again, talk to everybody so we can get it pulled, we can get it taken care of, because we don't want to say, well, we're just going to ignore the issues and keep going. That's not what we want. We want it taken care of. So.
For sure. Okay. Do you view social emotional learning in schools as negative or positive?
I actually both. So the reason why I view it as a negative thing is there's definitely, I think, some misunderstandings if a parent's not involved or helping a child. So I had a friend of mine tell me about, you know, their family had gone through some really personal things. And so her young child was in school and the teacher was trying to talk to the kids about, again, negative feelings or, you know, acting out. And the child came home and misunderstood what the teacher was saying and started blaming the mom. So, but it opened up a channel of conversation where the mom could work with the child and say, this is what's more appropriate. They went in and talked to the teacher and everything was resolved. The thing that I do worry about more, I guess, is the sides of, we have a lot of kids, especially at Twilla High, where parents aren't as much involved or they don't care, you know, as, or are busy, kind of like what you said, you know, both mom and dad work. And so you don't have that open conversation as much. And that's the part that I really worry about is, if we're not having that conversation, are these kids not getting the right information? Are they misunderstanding it and taking it the wrong way?
Right.
That is a tough one.
But then I also look at too, I mean, we know, you know, there's various mental health issues. You know, do we fund so you have counselors in more schools, or does that make it worse? Or as a society, do we push back and say this is more of a parent's job and they need to help with mental health with their own children? You know, I don't know where that line comes from of figuring out how to help all of the kids, whether their parents are involved or not.
You can't help all the kids. I mean, like you said, it stems from the parental unit. That's the origin of your tribe, and that's going to provide the quality of your kid on normal circumstances.
Yep.
Very true.
And you know, it's unfortunate, but we can only do a generic amount of coddling. And yeah, it's really the parents' job in society to raise the children, not
Right.
the schools.
That's very true. And the social emotional learning, maybe we should, me and Dave, look around and find some people who are more familiar with like all the assets, because it sounds like it's a big umbrella.
Right.
And I tried looking into it earlier today because, again, some of these questions came to my email, and I didn't have much of a clue of what it was,
Mm-hmm.
and so I, did some internet searching for about 3 hours, and I honestly know less than I did before I started. So I'm confused about, and I would like to find, and because it's such a big umbrella, it might have a good horizon on one side and negative effects on another.
It's definitely a gateway to indoctrination.
It can't, and those effects can be
Or can
reversed
be.
dependent on the parent's level of interaction in the child's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the ultimate thing. If the parents dog poop, the child's life is going to reflect that.
Right.
9 times out of 10,
Yeah.
easy. Okay. How would you vote on HB 11? What should be done for transgender students?
Ooh, that's a good question that I've actually been asked a lot. So, we need to protect our women's sports and our girls' sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would have voted for the ban. One of the things I think that is not talked enough about, though, is, of course, UHSAA. They have very strict guidelines as far as when, transgender can play in women's sports and various things like that, which I think is important. But I also think that this is not a done conversation. I think this is going to be a conversation that we're going to talk about for a very long time.
Oh, geez. Are you serious?
I do.
I was hoping we could just end it today. I hate this conversation.
I got a comment.
I
on
think
this
it's one of those things that it's like what I was saying about technology kind of catching up to our times, and we don't have anything. We don't know how to handle it, right?
Honestly,
Because
I
we've
think
never had to
there's-
deal with it.
I think society is fixated on sexuality so
think it's-
hard
Well-
that this just captures the wind out of the
I
sails.
think it's coming from the schools, and maybe not these schools here, but it is being sourced in a lot of schools through the activism.
So this is something, and I've been trying to ask.
I think it's
few people about this.
transgenderism in females right now is in females. This is females turning into boys is up. Last I looked, almost 1,000% from what
Right.
it was 20 years ago, or not even 20, like 8 years ago.
So let me ask you this, though. So I know Utah, we always like to lead in various things, right? Like economic growth and
Mhm,
business and
mhm.
everything else. Right now, there's 9 states that have passed this ban, right?
Mhm.
So I guess my question and what I've been trying to understand is, like you said, we're talking a lot about this. There's all these things. So why does Utah feel that we have to push and be part of these conversations? Why now? Why is this something that's important?
It's the wedge issue
for
of,
legislators.
It's the wedge issue of the election cycle.
Mhm.
And
It's so
that's exactly
colorful.
right.
It is.
It's so colorful to
no,
talk about.
it is. It's the wedge issue. It sits there with
Right.
abortion.
So
I mean, Florida, this is what the Republicans are used. And here's a question for you Republicans, because I'm not a Republican. I can ask dumbass questions. Sun Tzu, in a book written in the 1400s, said, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake.
Mhm.
Mostly women vote for Democrats. Just throwing it out there. Give this a couple of years to roll around, and next thing you know, there's not one genetic female playing a sport in the U.S., and the WNBA starts looking like the NBA with, implants, and maybe Republicans might capture a couple of lady votes.
I don't know what to say about that.
I'm just saying,
Right?
because this isn't hurting the female, the men.
Right.
There's not a woman on earth right now that's going in and getting that stuff done and then trying to enter a men's sport. It's only hurting the women.
I saw a movie about a woman who joined the Navy SEALs once, but I don't think she
Wasn't that Will
identified-
Smith's wife?
No, G.I. Jane, right?
That's what I
Yes,
said. Will
G.I.
Smith's
Jane,
wife.
that's the one.
Chris Rock was talking about how he
No,
wanted
that's
to watch
G.I.
it
Jane
again.
too.
Yeah, same. What's the difference? But anyways, okay. All right. Where we at? What do you think about books? Banned for pornography. We covered that one. Yeah. Good answers, and I hope I opened up her mind.
Natalie Klein. Let's skip down to that one.
Freed up on the. Did you vote for masks to be kept on by schools?
So I'm trying to remember. I don't think the school board ever actually had an option to vote on masks for schools. We only voted whether we would return to school face to face, and that came down. The masks was from the governor, and then when the executive power was changed, it was changed to our local county council to make the decision. And then after that, now it's up to the legislators and the governor to make the decision.
What's your thoughts on the masks in school?
Well, do you guys notice how they pushed that responsibility on the county commissioners?
Oh, they
had nothing to
They're
do
like,
with
oh,
it.
this is something we don't want to deal with.
Right.
Now all of a sudden they'll give us.
They
power,
washed
right?
their hands
They're like,
so fast of that. That
Yeah.
was they didn't have enough Purell to get that off their hands that quick.
Well, what was interesting though is even, when everything started shutting down and stuff, I had a few of my neighbors reaching out and they're like, are they closing schools? I didn't know. As a school, we had no information. We found out the same as everybody else. And that was frustrating because, as local control and, trying to understand what's happening, and we had no control, no power, no enforcement, nothing to do with any of those decisions. So that was really frustrating.
That is a tough one. That is, and granted, I don't think the masks had the positive effect against our latest ever devastating pandemic that was pushed on us, but that does not mean there wouldn't be a circumstance in the future that masks wouldn't be effective.
Right.
So that's an option I still would like to leave open. I just think we've got to remove politics out of response.
Absolutely.
I think that was our big killer. And I want to point out another thing real quick. We're going to continue reading, but if you are not on the Tooele Happy Hour page watching this and you're leaving comments, we probably won't see them because we've got the Happy Hour page opened up. So if you want to leave a comment, hop over to the Tooele Happy Hour page and leave a comment there, but we're going to continue on. Okay.
Does she support Natalie Klein and her efforts? Why or why not? Now, for those of you who don't know Natalie Klein was on the state school board.
She is still.
She still is.
Yep.
They tried to get her off.
They've been working at trying to censure her or give her slaps on the wrist from like day one.
And her crime was
speaking out against CRT. She's gathered quite a list. I've been through the list of stuff she's gathered from the different school districts. There was nothing in Tooele except for, I think, some of the kind of gateway, I don't like to call them gateways. Some of the processes or, SEL that has been an avenue other schools have used, but there was like a Davis County School District was having kids pledge allegiance to a rainbow flag, and there was a couple of instances of Black Lives Matter being fostered and taught in schools to an extreme level, which granted, I think Ray Charles could have saw that Black Lives Matter was a corrupt institution 15 minutes into its birth. If you just paid any attention, you could see that from the start. I mean, the way it passed from hand to hand over and over, and not one person was ever helped out of that outcome. Like the brown kid in Missouri was its initial birth, and it was Zimmerman and the kid case.
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, but the brown kid was like where it first started organizing, and his family came out a month later and says, we haven't seen anything. They
Brown
come
as
down
in,
here.
Brown as in that's his last name.
Yeah, that was
Right.
his last name. His last name was the brown kid that was shot by the sheriff deputy in Ferguson. I forget his name, but anyways, and they're like, we haven't had any outcome from this, I mean, they got better outcome from that lawyer Crump, who usually just goes in, profits, and runs, than they did from BLM. And so you could see BLM was a shady organization from the start. And then they started going after smaller organizations in different cities. Almost from year one, started dragging them through court to try to shut them down because they wanted to be the only game in town.
So Natalie Klein spoke out against all this stuff, and
Yep.
and there she was. They pinpointed her and tried to knock her off the state school board.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the Natalie Klein story?
I am. So, let's see. I don't necessarily blame Natalie for this side, but the one thing that I think a lot of the conversations that we don't talk a lot about are, and you kind of mentioned it earlier with the masks, politics in our schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this was the first time that a nonpartisan race on a state level was brought as a partisan race. And it kind of makes me wonder how much is playing to kind of the backlash or some of the things that she has talked about. So with that being said, I actually did see her when she came out and spoke to a few parents. When was that? 4 or 5 months ago
Where was it at?
in Stansbury Park.
Okay, yeah.
I can't remember how long ago it was. And there were a lot of things that she actually brought up that, it red flags, of course, concerns like, again, if they're happening in our schools, we want to know about them. Right. But then it also was some red flags on the other side. So I'll give you a really good example. She brought up public comment for school board meetings or open meetings even, right? If you look at the law, and actually it was just changed in this legislative session, open meeting law restricts what a body or a school board or county council, whoever it is, they can only talk about things on their agenda, right? And what the point she brought up was school boards will sit there as people are speaking in public comment and not have a conversation. Well, that's because legally they can't. Open meeting, they can only talk about what's on the agenda.
So they have to just listen at those points.
Right. Public comment or public hearing. It's for someone to, discuss whatever the issues are. And I was frustrated because I felt as a state school board member who'd been on for a reasonable amount of time should understand that. But it felt like it was very much, I'm going to throw the local school board under the bus and say they're not doing their jobs. So I look really great at what I'm doing.
Do you think
so
that was a lack of her knowing about that law and thinking that that instead of the school board being restricted from responding to each of those circumstances, maybe she felt that they were ignoring them when legally they couldn't respond?
And I don't know. I would hate to say what I think her intentions were. I was just telling you how I felt just sitting there listening. It felt,
Well, it would be personal to you because you're a school board.
right,
Yeah.
right. And it was almost like rather than us trying to work together, technically almost even on the same team, it was like, oh, like this is not
Did you take the
supportive.
opportunity to talk to her about that?
At the time I didn't. She was in the middle of her whole presentation, and that was just one of the points that she brought up.
Was that time she was at Stansbury Park?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so afterwards, I did talk to a couple of the ladies that actually put on the event, and I told her she listed a whole list of bills, and I said, "What's interesting about these bills and her positions on them?" I said, "If you actually go and meet with the other school board members and the superintendents, we almost feel the same way." Like we would agree, or I would agree with what she was saying, but I think a lot of it was almost her approach. And I understand people, we want a fighter. We want someone who's going to stand up for us.
Right.
But at the same time, I left there feeling like I was a bad mom and I was sacrificing my children because I wasn't following what she was saying. When in reality, we all want the same outcomes. I just don't want to go through it the same way she has.
Can I critique you a little bit?
Absolutely.
I think you should have went up and approached her.
Right.
I think you should have went up and said, "Hey, I'm on a school board and for one, she's traveling around giving this discussion, and if she's making a mistake, that would either A, give her the chance to correct it if she doesn't know, or B, if she doesn't correct it and chooses to leave it in maliciously, that would signify her as an untrustworthy actor.
Right.
And so I don't know her personally. I'm hoping that she is a trustworthy actor on this.
Right.
So that way you could say, look, here's what's going on. We can't do this. So either we could change the law so that it could just be a ruckus in the meetings, and that there's value to that.
Right. Absolutely.
Or we can keep the law the way it is, or, figure out how to have add-on meetings, like maybe once every 3 months, all these things that are brought up, those can be boiled into an open meeting where it's
right.
time to hash that out.
Well, and I'll be honest. I mean, I wish I had stayed after and visited with her a little bit. It was later in the evening. Of course, kids, all
that was
kind
that
of
one
stuff.
in Stansbury Park,
Right, yeah.
At the
Clubhouse.
clubhouse.
Yeah.
I was there.
But I do know that other school board members have reached out to her and said, hey, I would love to have a conversation with you. I actually even talked to our particular state school board rep, Matt Hymas, and he said he has a great relationship with Natalie, and they've talked a lot about various things. And I said, well, how do you feel about the event? Are you coming? And he's like, no, because he didn't want to be the target of the escape, like who was the problem versus someone who was actually trying to help. And I guess that's my whole point is, you hear the name, and it's no fault necessarily of her own. It's just kind of how what's developed. You hear the name Natalie Klein and everyone goes, ooh, right? It's become divisive. And that's unfortunate, because I really do think that there's a way, we can solve some of the problems, or we can all work together.
We definitely need to bring the groups together that can, because let's face it, we're looking out for the kids.
Right. We need to do what's best for kids.
We need to have
right?
both groups working together. I don't feel like you have any ill intent towards kids.
Right.
You haven't given me, maybe you have a special oven out back in a candy house, but
Nope.
I don't get that feeling. So I'm hoping that we can figure out how to work together on that.
Right.
And I mean, I personally have met Natalie Klein a few times. I think she's a nice lady. I think she's earnest, and I think she means well as too.
Yeah.
And I understand, it was late. And so hopefully in the future, you guys can get together.
Wouldn't surprise me if she was there tomorrow at the state convention. You're going there tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So you'll probably see her there. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Okay. We have second step here in the Tooele School District.
Yes, we do.
Okay. It isn't all happiness. It can be a trigger that can start mental illnesses. There is a link between marijuana and Cytia. There's true, but also, let's face it, lots of things can start mental illnesses, including scratches on your body that introduce different bacteria into your body, bad sewage, everything else. If a mental illness is lingering, lots of things can kick it off. Yes, marijuana can drive people deeper into mental illnesses, but not near as fast as methamphetamine does. Methamphetamine almost guarantees it.
Or McDonald's. I bet McDonald's can.
Oh, dude, boom.
Did you hear the play place is open?
You're kidding me.
Just letting people know.
I hope. Well, it looks like I know what my niece and nephew are going to recognize next time I pick them up for a ride. Okay. Ben says I had more respect for Terrell than any teacher I had. He's talking about Mr. Hunsaker.
That's the guy that
my
bit the ear.
teacher. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's Ben Hell. He went to school there. We called him Honey, and he didn't play. But he was very fair, and he was squared away. Linda says, it had to do with a picture that had two girls laying on top of each other. Was that the book being removed from school or something? Or
I'm not sure if that's what she's referring to,
or
if
is it
it's
that teacher?
the inappropriate
Okay.
part. Because I can't.
that would be, I think anytime a school would introduce explicit stuff to a child, you don't want your teacher saying this is okay when the morality at home says it's not.
Right. I
And-
agree.
And again, force of violence is what drags your kids to that structure.
Yep.
So you want them to be neutral on morality so that you don't have to argue about it at the dinner table. Or at least you don't have to argue about it at the dinner table with the force of the teacher. Now, there is an argument to be made if the student is being harmed at home or harmed away from the school and not getting a response at home to protect them. I do like it that a teacher is available to address that. How we make that available, I don't know. I just hope the teacher is a good teacher, a trusted person, and that child chooses to go to that next trusted person in line,
Right.
Okay. Heather says, second step concern is the inappropriate sexual contact weaved in the program. Yeah, and I hope that has, you talked about that was recognized
And removed.
And removed.
And if there's more, that's where we need to know about it. I know another board member actually has gone through the curriculum and she didn't find any more items or whatever. But if there is, someone needs to speak up and let us know.
So if your parents see it, unless, reach out to Camille, reach out to a local board member.
Reach out to us. We'll
Yeah.
take a look at it too.
Oh yeah, we would love to bust it open on our,
Love to talk about
real
that stuff.
life news program.
As long as there's no just no more tranny stuff. I'm so sick and tired of that topic.
Look, I recognize that there
Give that to
probably
Camille.
are people that feel that way in this world, and I want to treat them the same as I would any other human. I want to go up to them, I want to shake their hand, and I want to say taxation is theft and the government is not your friend.
Are you on a tie ride?
Right.
I'm always on that.
All right, next one.
All right, next one. And the problem is the role of the teacher not being the counselor, leaving it to the parents. And I agree. The teacher should be an educator, but I also want the teacher to be a trusted person in that child's life because
They got to identify the abuse when they see
I would like to
Right.
see the teacher and the parents become partners when it comes to that child. And the teacher, obviously not an equal partner, but also a person that understands the desire of that parent to raise this child healthy, happy, and send them out into the world to be successful. And also think about all you guys relying on this Social Security program. We're not breeding, so we better make kids that make money. All right. How would you have voted on HB 11? Do you think the legislature should stay out of those topics? HB 11, which one was that?
The transgender.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's the one we talked about earlier. And
Yep.
you already talked about that. Okay. That is a complicated topic. Yeah. Okay. They are not even looking at these. You are right, Glenn. We are not. Okay. The lottery. Ben wants the lottery. I'm all for idiot tax. Let's do it. Meaning HB 11.
He was talking about Camille. What did Camille think about?
Oh, what do you
the
think
lottery?
about the lottery?
Oh, I
Bringing
was
a
like,
lottery
what?
into.
Yeah. Are you running now, Jared?
What do you think about
finally
having
throw
a-
your hat in?
What do you think about having an idiot tax to help pay for schools?
Oh, so I have to, I'll be the first one to admit, love going up to Idaho, getting a lottery ticket, scratching it off and coming home. Right. Do
You
I
ever
think
win?
it? No, never.
there you go.
Because
Idiot
it's an
tax.
idiot tax. Right.
Let's
Do
see
I-
my brother. My brother actually won.
Shush. How
I know,
much?
5 million.
No way.
Was it good for him? No, he probably just he screwed it all up.
I
but-
thought that was just a myth that people ever won.
I know, I did too. I always told him it's like a game for the mathematically impaired, and
Right.
then he won.
Yeah.
Do I think it solves all of our problems? No, I think it just creates new ones.
It creates different problems. It might aid in the school, but then again, our legislatures will just rob that then also.
Right.
I got to ask people, in my ears, I sound real tinny. Do I sound tinny to you guys?
I sound tinny in mine.
This is weird.
Do I sound tinny to you?
No.
Okay, so it's a self-tin.
I was
Maybe it's because I'm
Effect.
hearing myself through my nasal cavity at the same time as this, and it's not. All right. HB 11, meaning the transgender issue with biological males and female sports. They might need some clarification on what that bill
No, we
is.
don't need any more clarification on the trainees. We're good.
Yeah.
Next question.
You know,
I was like, these
Please.
were an hour ago. So
I know.
I'm so sick of the topic. I'll be honest.
All right. Well, kids can just walk into the library at any time. So maybe rating sticker on all the books on the public library. Again, I would like to have the
Good idea.
libraries figure out a means of control to that. And that would mean they got to get a library card and the parents are notified, or there has to be a sign off when an underage person wants to draw out a book that rates between, you know,
well,
whatever.
I mean, I think about like with my daughter who's in second grade, right? She has parental controls on her Kindle. So she can't download a book that's inappropriate on her Kindle, just like she can a game or anything else. Unless she's as smart as my seventh grader who figures out ways around those things, right? But I think that's where I like the idea, the rating and notifying parents and those things. I just don't know if they are currently,
And it can
honestly,
be done.
I don't even know if the program exists. It sounds
It would
simple.
be easy to build.
And it
And it
could
would
be
be easy to
It could be a
build,
program
but-
where the kid goes into the library even without you and says, "Hey, I want to sign out this book." And the librarian says, "Okay, but this book sits above what your library card said you're allowed."
Or even what your
And
parents
then-
have restricted you
Yeah,
on.
and then an
right?
email pops up to the parent and they says, "You can get it." Your parent just call them and say, "We sent them the email."
Right.
They do an e-sign on it. You can get it. They don't. I'm sorry, you've got to go get, the
Yeah.
Bernstein Bears.
Yeah.
Okay, Linda laughed. I don't know what Dave said funny, but she liked it. Okay. Heather says, I don't think she answered the questions. How would you handle a concerned parent if they are concerned about a book or several books in the library?
I think I did answer it, but because of in the process of developing, what happens if a student checks out a book or whatever, they need to talk to the principal. Well, I would first talk to your teacher and then the principal, or both if you can. And if you still don't find a solution, or whatever the concern is, then you can go to, there's area directors, and then of course always the superintendent. So, or local school board members. I just wouldn't start with local school board members because they're going to ask you to talk to the teacher and the principal first.
Start with
So-
KSL.
Go up the chain of command.
Right.
So if there's a book that you're concerned about your child getting, well, I would say step one, talk to your child.
Step 2,
Yes,
take the
you're
book away
absolutely
from
right.
your child.
Yes.
And then step 2, contact the school, and because this may be a personal issue to you where the whole rest of the community is fine with it, and that may need to be something that's managed in home. I mean, like, I grew up with some Jehovah's Witnesses, and if a Halloween book might have been fully acceptable to everyone, or a birthday book, but not acceptable to these friends of mine because their home was restrictive on those items. So I think if it sits outside that purview, but definitely we need to figure out a rating system, and we need to make sure schools only carry age appropriate books for students in those schools.
Yep.
Okay. How did you vote on the mask mandate? We went through that. That wasn't something you could vote on. Okay. What about state finances, ESG, environmental, social government scores in the Utah economy? Yeah. What do you think about ESG?
It's interesting because I honestly had not heard a lot about it until the last 6 weeks. I know our state treasurer just put out a statement saying, that Utah is looking at moving forward of banning all the ESG scores. And so I'm supportive of that. I think anything that restricts our businesses from being able to be successful and operating their businesses the way they want to operate business is bad for our economy, and it's bad for business, and it's not our job.
Any top-down social score provided by the lords and the masters to the peasants is bad.
I agree.
But I don't want to give a bad taste in each other's mouth when we decide to rate each other voluntarily. If I go on like yelpperson.com and I want to say, Jared, hey, look, we made this agreement and you backed out, I'm rating you. it was peer to peer, that's not a system I wouldn't be opposed to that. Just like we have eBay scores for merchants and things like that, or scores for Amazon sellers and buyers. But anything where the government tells you what your score is going to be nothing but a stepladder to totalitarianism.
Well, ESG isn't just government; it's banking, it's all that. Like when
so you repeat yourself.
Well, yeah, when Biden came out and said it spoke negatively about fuel and all that, the banks took note of that and then quit giving out as much loans and starting up drilling, which drove our gas price up. It's things like that. I've got one simple answer to that. If you are with an institution, look into them, look into your bank. If you get Netflix or Disney Plus or any of that, look into it. And if they are doing something, the only way to answer this, I don't think you can answer this through a government, because this is a push that's coming internationally on the private side. You have to send, as a consumer, you have to shut this down. So we have to take that responsibility on ourselves. And if this is something we feel strong about, we need to say, I am no longer going to do business with you. And I think it's happening now. Netflix lost what, 20 billion this first quarter
Over ESG?
over people leaving for whatever.
The wokeism stuff?
The numbers came out. We don't know for sure.
They said it was the first decline in their history or something.
Yeah,
and it was huge.
Something like 15 years, 20 billion.
Yeah.
So that is people. So the consumers, this is where we as consumers got to step up, because this isn't government driven. They respond to governments, but governments do not write this legislation. This is consumer driven.
I wouldn't say consumer driven. I would say
it's just corporate driven. This is the
lizard people on top telling.
It is, but corporations are jumping onto this because so far consumers have sent the message they want this, because the commies have been much more reactive when it comes to things like this with the shutdowns. And so the corporations, either they're in on it or they're just responding to who gives the biggest noise. Now it's time, if you're against it, you've got to make that noise. So you've got to bite that bullet. And if you have a phone company that does things like this, you've got to search for a different phone company. You've got to dig into where your compatibilities lie with the corporations you do business with. And if a business, whether you love them or not, plays these games, you've got to let them know. And the only way to let them know is to shut off service with them. Yep. Cancel your subscriptions.
Cancel your banks. No more banks ever again, right?
Well, you jump to different banks.
I don't know if there are other banks that are not participating in this.
I would imagine our local credit unions.
Yeah, you've got credit unions that may not. But if a bank's doing that, you go in and you say, and you make it known. I want to withdraw everything I've got here. I want to close down my account. Why do you want to do that? And if they don't ask, say specifically, I want you to send this up. I'm doing this because of actions you've made on the market. And it takes time and it takes research, but you've got to become an informed consumer. That's where we're at.
Right.
All right. The Great Salt Lake drying up issue has to do with the arsenic and toxic chemical dust that is being blown into our valley in Salt Lake, causing respiratory issues and health issues. Doug Sagers knows all about this information. Yes, the Great Salt Lake, by it drying up, is exposing the minerals that has been left in the bottom of that. And those lighter minerals, some of them are arsenic, some of them are some of those lighter minerals that will blow in there. So it would be nice if we could get ahead of the Great Salt Lake drying up.
It would be interesting to know, though, how much that's impacting our valleys there versus the gravel pits and how they affect our air.
That's a tough one. And the cow farts.
Well, we could spend $400 million on that study.
Right?
I'll tell you what.
Or the
legislature, for $20 million, I will stand in a field and smell the cows.
There you go.
I will drive behind a couple of rock hauling trucks, and then I will walk across the Great Salt Lake.
Sounds like a great price, Jared.
Dude, I'm a bargain. Also, it affects the ability of the snowpack to form in the winter of northern Utah, leading to an even greater water shortage because snow cannot form due to the dust blowing around it melts it. And also, there's not as much moisture in the air in the cold time of year, causing the snow to come. It's a cascading effect. I don't know what men can do to reverse it, and I'm hoping we're already not on an unstoppable path with it.
A lot of it has to do with the gravitational pull of Jupiter because of its huge mass. It actually deviates the Earth's position from the sun by plus or minus 400 million miles.
Well, is that the what do they call that? The Maunder effect?
I'm sorry, not 400 million miles, but yeah, it's like let's say we are 93 million miles away from the sun. So 400,000 miles. My apology.
Well, hopefully the $40 million will solve or figure out what the issues are.
Ooh.
That's what I'm hoping.
But we can't knock Jupiter out of the solar system because it stops all the asteroids from hitting.
It is just a huge environmental effect of chain reactions.
Okay. Linda says, "Oh, man or woman." Okay. Dave said something funny again, I'm sure. Okay. So we said something funny in there. That was good. I hope everyone liked it. Or possibly C. Maybe that you misunderstood her intent. Maybe get clarification is the best thing to do.
Yep.
Okay.
And she admits that she wishes she stayed after and talked to her.
Yeah. And everyone, we got to understand that she's just a person and she's got kids at home and had to get there to him because that 7-year-old is downloading stuff on that.
She better not.
And at this point, Natalie Klein is a public figurehead who is spearheading this movement. So keep in mind, like if you're gonna take on a topic and you can find some more padding for your topic, sometimes you get anxious and you just throw it on there on that presentation.
And
I do it too.
I'm going to give the credit that Camille had to get home to her kids, and I'm going to give the credit that Natalie just didn't know the abilities that the districts have. And I hope that together they can come together and figure out better mitigations for the issues that everyone sees. How do you feel about school choice and Common Core?
So good question. So I think sometimes people, I'll say even me. So remember the WPU, weighted pupil unit, right?
Yeah, the fat kid measurement.
Right.
Yeah.
So that actually does follow our kids, right? So how the schools get their funding
So
is
it
based
tracks
off
the fat
of,
kid all 12 years?
No, but it's based off of October 1st. You know, the districts submit how many kids they have enrolled in school, and then that's what's based off their funding. So if you have more kids in another district versus another school or whatever, it changes the funding. So with that being said, you know, you have money that follows the student to where if they go to a charter school, all that kind of stuff. The part that I have a hard time with is if we take that money, that WPU, and provide it over to a parent and then they use that money for a private school, then you have taxpayer dollars now funding private schools with the same restrictions as our public schools. And it just causes more issues and it doesn't help the student overall. So if you listen to like a lot of the committee meetings and stuff during the legislative session, you know, people will sit down and they'll say, well, we want school choice or we want vouchers or scholarship, however you want to phrase it, because my student needs more one-to-one attention or in smaller class sizes. Well, taking that money out of our public education system doesn't help anybody with smaller class sizes or one-to-one attention. If we're able to fund that and restrict those 32 line items like I was talking about, then we can help with the one-to-one and the smaller classes and help students, and it's not removing them from the system just to cause more problems down the road.
But it could help with homeschooling budgets, right?
Well, it depends. So if you homeschool your child and you're receiving taxpayer dollars, how are you now accountable for that money?
But then again, that person homeschooling their child is also paying tax dollars.
Right.
With a gun to their head. I shouldn't say paying. You'd never pay taxes taxes are stolen from you. Matter of fact, in 48, they started stealing them directly from your paycheck because the IRS said, yeah, people.
It's a social contract, Jared.
That's right. Yeah, I signed it. I remember, that social contract. I signed it.
And that's part of that 2-step program in high school where you.
Yeah. But anyways, so they're also paying that.
Mhm.
And there could be a myriad of reasons why people homeschool. Masks were one of them. Some of the threats of fines that were whispered about was another one. A lot of parents, and also, let's face it, the Zoom classes, I still don't think we've fully seen the effects of the shutdown yet.
Right. And I agree with that. And
I think we're going to see dropout levels of academic attainment from this.
right.
Like, you may as well go ahead and teach the kids about Black Lives Matter all day, because
No.
we're going to see some scary outcomes. I'm seeing it in my own family members.
Oh yeah. So but you bring up a good point with homeschooling. So you have homeschooling where kids are at home and mom sits down, or dad, whoever, right, and teaches them and follows a curriculum and does real homeschooling. Then you have public school at home, which is where kids sit down, they're in the computer and they do like My Tech High.
Aren't they still a part of a school, though?
Right.
They're still a part of the
an online
district.
program,
And like
right?
here, it would be Blue Peak.
Right. Well, now it's called My Tech High, is similar to Blue Peak.
So it's not Blue Peak anymore for the homeschool?
So Blue Peak is just for
Just for the bad kids to actually go to school.
you said it, not me.
I graduated from its predecessor. I
Right.
can say whatever I want about it.
Right. So that's what Blue Peak is designed for, right? And then you have My Tech High for so kids will use My Tech High for like if you don't have enough credits. There's some kids that will use My Tech High for like their academic classes, like math, science, reading, or language arts, whatever. And then they'll go to the high school and they'll take drama or band or sports, whatever.
So
it
it'll be
is.
kind of a mixed bag.
A hybrid kind of a thing, right? Our elementary schools, there isn't so much of an online program, at least in our district, but other districts are kind of creating their own. So it kind of creates questions, right? So you said homeschool at the beginning, but it's a very general statement. Well, then do you receive the WPU because your child is doing homeschooling, but which homeschooling?
Well, they could do pods too, where people
Right.
get together.
That's
and-
mostly
and-
what they ended up doing.
Yeah, and they end up doing, and I know that was big in like Utah County and stuff, right? Where you have like 3 or 4 families and one parent would teach all of the kids and stuff. So
Or they would take turns, and then they.
One's good at math,
I
the
had a
other's good at
family
English.
member that went into the homeschooling, joined a pod. I think there was like 6 families in it. And because Grantsville, where they were, had the French immersion, they shopped around on Facebook and found a French teacher in France to continue that.
wow.
And that
That's
allowed
awesome.
the kids to stay in the immersion program,
Right.
so that when they come back a year later, they were still allowed to stay in that French immersion program, which had they not done that,
Right.
they might have been removed from that program.
But I think that's where it's important. We ultimately, you always want to do what's best for the kid, right? So is it better for them to be at home? But I know like with My Tech High, they also receive credit. So they get a computer, and then I believe they can choose from, like a family pass to Thanksgiving Point, or there's various places. One of the things though, again, I think it goes back to those 32 line items, right? So you're always going to have people in education right now saying, but we're never fully funded. We don't have enough money for these lower classroom sizes and one-to-one attention. We have these other things in place, but now you want to take money away from us. Well, that's because we don't know where those 32 line items are affecting our kids or helping anybody. And that's what we need to address first. And then I think also too, do you receive the credit if you're homeschooling only 2 classes at home, or are you homeschooling 1 class, or are you doing it all? Like, how does that all work? Because we don't want to take everything from public education and leave everybody to say, well, I'm going to fund all of your private school classes or pay a portion of it and using the taxpayer dollars.
Sounds like it's going to be a very complicated technical manual on how to redistribute funds.
It could be.
What if we separate school from state? Huh? That's where I'm at.
Is it written in the Constitution that we have to have schools?
Yeah, you have to provide education for all children.
Where that's in the Utah Constitution.
No, it's in the.
Is it in the?
I know it's in the Utah one for sure.
But
Yeah.
you don't have to provide sports, right?
Here comes Dave.
I was just wondering.
Dave
Well,
is still hoping
so-
that the head cheerleader's going to like the mathlete one day.
Do you not think sports teaches kids anything?
I didn't say that. I didn't
I'm
say
just
that.
curious.
I'm saying what are we legally obligated to as tax cattle?
As far as sports go, does sports cost the average school district money to put on, or does it make money, or is it a net negative?
I would say all of the above.
Okay.
So a lot of it, because the budgets are divided and broken up in different ways, right? But a lot of, especially the big football teams and stuff, they do a lot of their own fundraising for a lot of their own expenses. When was that though? 3 years ago, the state school board started doing more of a audit with all of the fees and what parents were paying for their kids to play football or cheerleading, band, drama, all of these different things. And so you'll see those fees coming out now every spring. What's interesting about that, though, is some of the big school districts are just absorbing the fees. And so parents aren't having to pay the extra whatever curricular activity their child is involved in, which I don't feel is necessarily fair or right, because the bigger school districts, they have a larger tax base. So now all of a sudden their kids can do anything and everything they want, where we have a smaller tax base and we're saying, sorry, it's still going to cost $3,000 for your kid to do cheerleading. And that falls again still on the parents, even though we have higher taxpayers, so that's another complicated issue as well.
The distribution of wealth can get very messy.
Mm-hmm.
Can.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at like our WPU or weighted pupil unit, we
Yeah.
4,000 kids.
Fat kid measurement.
Yeah, we get $4,000 per kid, and Park City receives $16,000. So
Now you might get a lot of kickback for Jared saying this on TV. So not TV, but
I was
the
on TV.
internet. That's Jared saying the fat kid thing, not Camille. Don't hold it against her.
What, the fat kid measurement?
Yes, that's all you.
Oh,
Somehow
because I said
you're right.
weighted
You're right.
pupil unit.
You're right. Fat student measurement. Sorry. Okay. Tony Knudson. Oh, I'm wondering if this is. Oh, quit jumping on me. I'm trying to read something. If the higher ed system is kicking out a bunch of liberal teachers and librarians, can we change our hiring practices? Maybe a classic education isn't necessary. What about a certification program that might bypass the liberal indoctrination?
You're talking my language, brother. Talking my language.
It goes back to what we were saying though
A
earlier.
relative of yours?
Yeah. it's
Okay.
My husband.
Oh,
He is a very wise
He is.
individual.
Yeah.
sitting on top of a mountain.
Right.
Sage advice.
So it goes back to you can't ask somebody, right? Like there's
You
some,
can't ask somebody if they went to college.
no, you can't ask those questions, but you can't ask them how liberal they are.
Or political affiliations.
right.
But you can say, "Did you go to college?"
And then again,
And you could ask
what
what
college?
college.
I
Very true.
have discovered that liberal means different things to different people too.
in different time periods.
So does conservative.
So does conservative. Apparently, 20 years ago, conservative meant we spent all the money and, went to all the wars and,
Very true.
So that is a tough one. But I do like the idea of,
A certification program.
where someone doesn't have to have a college degree, like say a wood shop.
Yeah.
Why
So-
would that guy have to carry a bachelor's degree in liberal arts to teach wood shop if he's a functioning woodworker?
Right. So our state has a program, a path, whatever, right now where teachers can do, it's called an ARL, an alternate route licensure. So say they've been
Take the belt route,
woodworking for 20
215,
years.
cut around the north side,
Right?
drop in.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, say they were woodworking forever and then they decide they want to be a teacher. They could count that experience. And I don't think it even matters what bachelor's degree they have, as long as they have some form of degree, then they can become a teacher.
But why do
But I
they
may
have
be
to
wrong
have a
on the-
degree?
Well,
That's,
and-
I think that's,
And that's the part that
this should
I
be
don't know
pillow
for sure.
talk you guys are having, not open discussion. But
So-
why is that degree required? Because let's face it, our colleges are the institutions that's destroying this nation.
Right.
Why is that college degree? Because if he has 20 years,
Let me answer this a little bit. So, okay, if he's got 20 years as a woodworker, he doesn't have 20 years as an instructor
As a classroom
instructing,
teacher.
and he doesn't have the ability to prepare the lesson plans as the indoctrinated ones are. So like,
he
they have
doesn't know
specific
how to
ways of
say. He
doing
doesn't
their
know
lesson
how to
plans.
say on day one, to turn on the bandsaw, you first must pull the
Right.
emergency
Correct.
stop out and then hit the green button. In case of emergency, that emergency stop button is big. It's almost 2 inches around, and you can find it from anywhere trapped on this machine.
Where's your lesson plan, Jared?
I just laid it out. Cut and dry.
But
It's supposed to be written
if
in
you
a
look
particular
at,
I could
format.
write that
and
down.
actually not even written, if you looked at some of those bills that almost passed this legislative session, you would have to have it all posted online so parents can review it.
So he also has to be a web page designer.
No,
And you have to be able to adjust and change for the kids that may not understand it and do assessments. So I know that
so
that
like
comes
Major
with,
Payne when he's talking to the deaf kid. You don't understand where it's coming out of. Put a boot in your. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know some of that comes with
but still,
that's the
the
kickback you're going to
training,
get.
right?
but still, they could. Those are things that you could.
Right.
You could have a 2-day course to teach them how to design and
Yeah.
lay that out versus a 4-year degree
right.
going deep into student debt, so we can have more people crying about their student debt, so that the people who didn't go to college should have
Right.
to pay off the people who went to college's student debt, so they can be a teacher.
Right. And I know that the state does offer, like I said, that alternate, whatever it is.
But again, they
licensure,
still
I'm just
have
not
to
sure
have that-
exactly what all of the
That
details
barrier
are.
to entry, which is a a
Right.
degree from a.
But at the same time, I mean, you would still want to make sure that our applicants are being vetted some form because you don't want to have.
I think all of them should be vetted outside of the colleges.
right.
Not how did you do on your keg stand at the sorority party.
right.
They should be vetted by criminal records,
right.
things like
Background
that. Those
checks,
are the
all of
vettings
that.
I truly care about.
Right. Right.
I honestly, if the guy can teach wood shop,
Right.
they shouldn't have to have a 4-year degree to
Yeah.
carry on that. Or if, say, someone didn't graduate a college, but has successfully written, say, 12 books,
Right.
could that person possibly teach a writing class without having to attain a degree?
Yeah.
Or better yet, how to get a book published class, because that's where the tires meet the road, how to make a living class.
Right. Absolutely.
Or
yeah.
could someone that maybe works at H&R Block moonlight once in a while and teach kids about taxes?
Yeah.
Some of
know.
those financial issues that are not being addressed in our schools right now.
Some of in the 11th grade, they have to take a financial literacy class, and they actually learn. It's very basic taxes, but they do learn some.
Okay.
How to write a check.
So they take all the numbers.
I did that one.
Knock
Yeah.
them in down by 3/4 and say, this is how much you're paying taxes. It's not,
Right.
it's not actually in the end 52% of your income.
Don't
Yeah,
forget to
and-
write off your mileage.
Again, that financial literacy class is another one of those line items that legislators passed like 10 years ago. That's required.
They
in
should have
classes.
me teach that class. I'd be like,
So-
all right, you guys are all slaves to the state.
Do you think they know how to do Bitcoin after that?
Hey, yeah.
They should.
All right. One more time. Linda, good job, Jared, David, and Camille. Lots of questions. Thanks for answering them. Yes, we want to thank Camille for coming on. And I love it when we have a guest on who comes with some knowledge and all that stuff, because
Subject matter expert in
this is really important. And
student boards.
do you think it'd be good to get someone, who's got who's had the finger on the pulse of the school districts in there?
Yeah, this is the hot
Something to
topic.
think about. This is someone that could get in there and shake it up. This could be,
And she survived a 2.5 hour podcast with us.
yeah,
We'll close this out with Linda's last question. Ha ha.
yeah, it's very good. Okay, again, everyone. All right, and it's a buddy of mine told us we got to introduce ourselves.
Oh, when we start the podcast?
Yeah.
I like it. He's right.
It's
Yeah.
done.
I'm
This is
Jared, Dave, Camille, our guest. We always introduce the guests. Anyways, tomorrow we are going to be at the Republican Party convention as press. And Dave, he's also a state rep, so I think he's there officially. But I'm there as just press, so I'm going to get me a fedora with one of them piece of toilet paper. It says press on it or whatever. I don't know. I've got to look at the old movie, see what they got. But so we're going to be there. So look forward to having some reports come out of there. Even if we just hop on throughout the day and give updates, we'll try to snatch a couple of interviews, pull people aside, and all that other stuff. And if you see that coming across and you want to throw questions in, feel free to throw questions. Remember, questions, we're pretty much only going to read them off the happy hour page when they come in live. I do see them on other
Group pages
or stuff. Afterwards, I tend to look at all those, but while we're running hot, I only open up this one. Thanks for joining us, and we will be on a couple times tomorrow, I'm sure. Thank you, Camille.
Yeah, thank you. It's been my pleasure. I'm glad to be here. And I just want to throw out really quick, you guys are going to be there bright and early at 8 a.m., right? For the breakout sessions?
7.
Yeah.
We're there at 7.
Okay. Because the first vote starts at 8, and then 8:50 is mine, and then 9:30. So just want to make sure delegates know to be there early.
Yep, we're on early. All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
He's
Thank
got to
you.
be there at 8. I've got to be there at 7 to get my fedora.